So what I have seen that there is a lot of interest and lot of enthusiasm about transforming to Agile, and a lot of companies are and teams are able to transform to Agile and basically getting the benefits of Agile. And on the other hand, there are companies that struggle to move to Agile just because of their situation, because of the constraints or limitations in their environment. And I see them struggle with this because they are not able to move. Maybe their leadership is not on board, or maybe their environment or the software that they're using is legacy, like mainframes, COBOL, and all those kind of things. And the programs are so intertwined that they cannot create a small iterations or small deliveries. So there is a real, kind of a I'll not say showstopper, but limitation, I'll say. And also sometimes some companies have very rigid practices. Culture is a big thing moving to Agile. So a lot of those constraints, and because of which some organizations are not able to move. So, but I believe that you don't have to turn things upside down to get the benefits from Agile. And I want to share this in presentation. I teach it as a full day class. I have done this at several places, and it was liked very much. I delivered this class as a web class in 2 half-day sessions, and people have found really very useful, and some of the things that they can apply right away. And I'll expect some of that you can get benefit of this and apply some of this right away, right today. Okay, so let's see what is the agenda. So we'll start with your expectations from this webinar. Normally that's how I start any of the webinar or any of my training sessions. Then we'll get into what kind of practices I'm talking about, and if we have time, I'll show you a couple of slides about RefineM, and we'll go from there. So let's get started. Let me spend a few minutes here and see what is the one thing that you want to take away, from this presentation. What will be one thing? Anybody? You can either talk or you can put your comment in the chat box, whatever is convenient to you. So what is the one thing? Yeah?
It's Melinda. It's very interesting. Agile gets thrown out a lot, the words. And so I think it would help this group to understand what you mean by it and what others mean. Because I hear a lot of people saying it's no documentation. It's just you put it in and you move forward. So I think it's a little more to it than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And first few of my slides will talk about that particular aspect. To bring everybody on the same page to answer the question like, what is Agile? So if somebody asks you, what is Agile? How do you answer that question? So yeah, I will talk about that, Melinda. Yeah, sure. What are waterfall teams? So what are waterfall teams? I'll say the teams that do waterfall projects. So they are involved in waterfall projects. So that's what I call waterfall teams. I should call waterfall projects maybe. But it is the teams who implement the methodology. So that's why I'm calling it waterfall teams. Understanding which projects are good candidates for Agile and which are not. Okay, that I will touch upon that. I have a short video on that on my YouTube channel. If you go on YouTube and type RefineM, you will find that there's a little presentation on that. It's called as "Is Agile a Silver Bullet?" And you can see I've explained it well in which situations or what kind of projects Agile is a fit and which case it is not. So that, yeah, if you're interested, then you can see over that. Anybody else? Very quick, in less than a minute. Okay, so let's move forward. I'm CEO and Agile coach consultant with RefineM. I started this company around 5 years ago, a little more than 5 years ago, and the vision of the company is to help organizations, many organizations, many teams to turn their project management capability into a competitive advantage. And all of you are project managers, so you understand if the projects are done on time, within budget, and meeting customer expectations, then that organization is going to beat their competitors like anybody, like no one else. And we know in the project world that we are, still about 60–70% of the projects are not able to make up in time or cost, or don't deliver what they were meant to deliver. So it's a challenge. We have PMI, and we have a lot of PMI chapters, and the things are improving. I'll say with PMBOK and with Agile, people are getting more and more aware and implementing some of very good practices that are helping them deliver their projects in a more predictable manner and benefiting client, customer, everyone. But still, it is a challenge. You will still see projects, finishing on time is still a challenge. And I'll give you an example. I just completed building my own house. I don't know how many people have built their own houses. Um, but when I was talking to the contractor and talking about the cost, and he said I should keep 10% extra budget for any cost overruns, which was very nominal, because the company that he used to work with, that construction company, used to keep about 17% as a cost overrun budget kind of a thing, if you want to call contingency. And I use some of the project management practices. I created a WBS. I created the detailed cost structure and followed that, and we were actually under budget. The project finished about a month late because of the weather and all those kind of things. But we were well under budget, and that contractor was very surprised. So project management can actually yield very good results if it is applied. And that's one of the key visions of my company, to help, whether you use Agile or you don't use Agile. You would have read all of that in the meantime. So let's move forward. So some of the things that we are doing at RefineM, so we are running a business as well as helping project management community to get some benefits from my experience. And this is one of the examples of doing this webinar. And we also do every month, we do free webinars on first Wednesday of the month, same time, 12 to 1 o'clock. And these are the next two webinars. And if you are interested in Agile, we are running a series of webinars on Agile. And these two topics are very interesting for those folks who are trying to implement Agile. So if you want to join, 7 June, July 5th are the dates. Same GoToMeeting credentials, same GoToMeeting ID, 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. And as I was talking about Agile Practice Waterfall Team new class, and this new workshop that I developed, Lean Agile Process Improvement Workshop. Most of the time, Agile is primarily used for software development or product development. People struggle to implement Agile in non-development environment, like using let's say IT infrastructure work or any business process. For example, how to use Agile for issuing a insurance policy, okay, or the process of registering a patient for any kind of treatment, or recruiting, for example. How do you use Agile? And how do you look at your process, and how do you use Agile? Actually, Lean and Agile combined together can help improve process efficiencies by 15 to 40% in in just few weeks. Very quick results. Like in Scrum, you get very quick result. You start delivering software within, uh, 2 to 4 weeks. Similarly, these lean agile processes can help the non-product development or non-software work in very quickly. And also giving back to the community, I am trying my best to help all project professionals who want to achieve their PMP. So I have a lot of resources. I do a live PMP video chat every Saturday at 9 a.m. Central. So you are more than welcome to join that chat. Same GoToMeeting ID for that chat as well. And if you register, we'll communicate more about the chat, but you can join the chat, get answers to your questions, get advice if you are doing your PMP. So a lot of things I'm doing in addition to my business to help support the community. Okay, so let's talk about Agile. Let's answer this question, what is Agile? So what do you think? Let me talk to you a couple of people. So if I ask a question, what is Agile? What will be your answer? What will be your answer? Anyone, you can type or talk.
It's Melinda again. To me, it's putting in the minimal viable product as fast as you can and then building on it as you go. Okay. Instead of doing everything at once.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Agile is a doctrine. Okay, somebody said about that. Okay. Okay. So let me provide you a very simple and very generic definition of Agile. So Agile is a set of 4 values and 12 principles implemented through more than half a dozen practices. So it's values and principles. Those are implemented through practices. Now, what are those 4 values? That is what Agile Manifesto talks about. And that's what you are seeing here. And things in the green here are considered as more valuable than the things on the right. So, but it is more valuable, but it doesn't say the things on the right has no value or you should not do them. Like somebody was talking about not doing any documentation. So you need to do documentation, what is required for your project or for your whatever you are doing. So whatever is required, but what it says that where do you spend your more time? So that's how you need to see if you are spending 100 hours in your project, where you will spend more time. So if you're spending 80 hours on documentation and 20 hours on software, that's not Agile. That's not Agile. That's not the value, one of the value of Agile. So you need to be spending your time in creating that working software rather than documentation. So not that 0. So based on your situation, based on what you're doing, maybe you'll spend 10% of your time, 20% of your time in documentation, but remaining 80-90% time goes here. So that's somebody was talking about the document. That's a wrong interpretation of saying that you don't need it. You don't need documentation, don't need a plan. Actually, Agile, you spend more time in planning in Agile rather than Waterfall. So in Waterfall, you do planning once and then you probably don't do planning, you just update your plans. In Agile, you do planning in every iteration, every sprint. So you do planning at different levels. You don't do upfront planning, for the entire project, but you do planning at different levels. You create a product plan, you create a roadmap, you develop release plans, and then in every release you do sprint plans. So you do lots and lots of planning. So it's not that you don't do planning in Agile, but you should be welcoming changes, not resisting changes and not having customer go through a rigorous change control process. So that will not be agile. So the value is respond to change. Be welcome the customer changes. So these are the 4 values of agile. And then we go to the 12 principles of agile. So satisfy customer. How do you satisfy customer? Through early and continuous delivery. That is how you satisfy customer. Welcome changing requirement, even late in development. Even late in development, like even when, maybe towards the end of your release, if a change comes up, you should be willing to, welcome that change and do whatever can be done. More responsive to your customer. More responsive to your customer. There's another simple definition of agile. Agile is iterative, customer focused, and data driven. So anything that you do has 3 components. It is iterative, it's customer focused, and data driven. So you collect data from what you're doing and then use that data to improve and show the improvement through the data. So it's very data driven. So the organizations that are not able to define the matrix for agile transformation, they will not see any change. They will not even see where are the opportunities, and that's not agile. So agile is set of 4 values, 12 principles implemented through several practices. I'm showing you about 16 practices here. Several, and many of them you would have heard, many of them you would not have heard. So now that brings a question: what is a Scrum then? What is Kanban? What is XP? What is all that? If you say, somebody says Agile is Scrum, no, that's not the answer. So what is Scrum? Can anybody talk about that? What is Scrum? Many of you would have heard that, I'm sure. So what is Scrum? Anyone can take a shot? Talk or write? Absolutely. Very good, Tanaj. One methodology for delivering, for implementing Agile. One methodology. So what happens that you have here 12 practice or 16 practices, there could be more. I will say more than a dozen practices. So you have here a list of practices. So what Scrum is one method or methodology which implements some of these practices, not all of them, some of these practices and delivers, those 12 principles, implement those 12 principles and values, those 4 values. So take a subset of these and implement them. Similarly, Kanban is very similar. Kanban is very similar. It takes some of these practices and a subset of these practices, maybe there are a couple which are not here, add those, and that becomes another methodology. So they are different methodology under a bigger umbrella called as Agile. So Agile is not Scrum, Agile is not Kanban, but those are the methodologies that use a subset of these practices to implement Agile. So you can start seeing some of these things. Now Scrum and Kanban and whatever XP and all those kind of things, they are called Agile because they implement these. Now think about environments where you may not be able to implement Scrum because of the situation I talked about. Let's say you have a legacy system and you cannot deliver every 2 weeks. So Scrum is not going to work. Or you have a situation where there is your input is changing way, or your requirements are changing very fast. So normally in a 2-week sprint, when you have completed the planning for 2-week sprint, you don't bring in any change during the sprint. Your changes are in between sprints. So when the sprint is over, you can go back and look at your backlog and see if you want to. And I will explain some of these as we go along. So, but some of you are familiar with those terms, so I'm using those terms. So I will in my I focused on in this presentation or this seminar. I'm full focus on the 10 here, which I think can be applied or can be implemented in any environment. They can be implemented in any environment. You don't have to follow Scrum. You don't have to follow Kanban. You don't have to follow XP. You don't have to follow. You can bring in agility in your team by implementing some of these practices, if not all 10. So you can be agile. You can be agile if you're following those 4 values, those 12 principles, without implementing Scrum, without implementing Kanban, without implementing any of those more common methodologies. You can still be agile. So usually it takes me all day to go through each one of these, but I will try to move as fast as I can through this in next 30 minutes or so, and try to cover as many practices as I can, and we'll say how you can implement them in Waterfall. So that will be Waterfall, or I'll say the regular other environment, how you will implement them. So that is how the rest of the webinar is structured. I'll give a pause here for about maybe 20-25 seconds here and see if you have any questions. Does anybody has any questions so far what I talked? Okay, no questions. So let's move forward. You can always type your questions. So let's talk about before we go there, this is one more slide here which talks about mapping of agile practices to principles. So the 10 practices that I mentioned in the previous slide, you can see how they are mapped to agile principles. So you can see how these practices implement the principles. Okay, so let's see. So what are the top 3 practices that you think you can implement in your waterfall projects? What are the top 3 practices? And I'll put these practices back here. What are the top 3 practices that you think you can put in your waterfall project without any problem, without any approval, without changing anything upside down? What are those practices? Can you pick up?
So, NK, this is Sanaz. I think we can easily do customer involvement through our project. We can do retrospective, and then having some of the others maybe hard if it's a sort of a CVP-driven major project, but any kind of stand-ups or interactions, daily might be too frequent, but any kind of frequent interactions would also be helpful.
Yeah, great. And I'm seeing some response here. Smaller iteration, frequent reviews, customer involvement. Yeah. Progressive elaboration. Yeah, I did a whole 1 hour of webinar yesterday on progressive elaboration as my monthly webinar. Customer involvement, UI frame. Yeah, wireframes. Yeah, absolutely, Joe. If you are developing software that requires a user interface, wireframes are great thing. Wireframes are great things to collect customer input and quickly come up with UI requirements. It's a very powerful practice, very, very powerful practice. And it is not just for people practicing Scrum. Anybody can do it. Anyone can do it, and you don't need any approval from anyone. As a project manager, you can implement these practices in your projects without any approvals, without doing anything. And they will benefit your project a lot. So very, very good. I saw some of the responses here, and we'll talk more as we go forward. So so let's talk about backlog. Let's talk about backlog. What is a backlog, and how do you adapt the backlog practice in waterfall environments? So backlog is a prioritized list of requirements or features. So that's the definition of backlog. The key part is it is not just a list, but it is a prioritized list. So that's the key. It is a prioritized list, and prioritized from the perspective the value to the customer. So what is most valuable to the customer goes on the top, and what is next, like that. So the items at the bottom of the product backlog will be of much lesser value than the items on the top. So what it does, it helps team to stay focused on high priority all the times. So you start working on the items at the top. Once those are done, then you pick next item. So the team is always focused. So it brings focus to the team, always focused on the high priority items. So you're not working on low priority item. You're not taking the list of requirements that you completed. Rather, you are working on high priority item, and it also gives team and customer room to make changes. Because you can see in the list, if a new item comes that was not originally there, and if there are 20 items in the list and this comes, then it doesn't go as 21st. It really goes as number 9. And in case there is an issue of budget or scope, or somebody is asking about how do you handle scope creep. So basically, there in agile projects, scope is something which is flexible. Your time and cost are fixed, but scope is flexible. So within that time and cost, you deliver the most items from the top of the backlog, and the remaining items that are not delivered, they are at the bottom of the backlog, and they are not so much valuable. And it will be a customer call later on to see whether they want to add more money to deliver those, or say stop, we don't have to do that. So it allows it gives team and customer room to make changes. And the most important part, it utilizes resources on the right things, doing right things. That's what it enables. So team is always working on right things, and they are right things because they are higher value to the customer. So that's the concept of backlog. And now, how do you implement this in waterfall teams? So we know in our waterfall teams, the entire functionality is to be delivered in a big bang way, like one implementation, or there could be phases for larger projects. So, but staying focused is still very important for waterfall teams. You need to stay focused, and you should keep your focus on higher priority items. So still you can take your business requirements or your RTM, requirement traceability matrix, that you have normally. So you can take the RTM and prioritize. You can still do that. You can still prioritize. You can work on top items first and get those completed before you complete other. You can still deliver in phases. You may not be able to deliver them in 2 weeks or 4 weeks because of other limitations or other problems, but you are spending your time on higher value items or more important things first. So this will still provide the value. It will still provide the focus, you may not be able to deliver, you still deliver at the end, which is fine, which is absolutely fine, because that's what you're supposed to do. But it will help you to stay focused. And I have seen many waterfall teams or waterfall project, if they implement this, the customer sees lot of value, lots and lot of value. So okay, we are putting our attention or a focus on this is more important. Sometimes when you start discussing things that are not important to the client, they may get disengaged. How do you improve or your customer or stakeholder engagement? This is one way of increasing your stakeholder engagement. Talk about the things that are important to them first, and then talk about the things that are not important to them. So that way you will keep them engaged instead of trying to go through your list that is not prioritized. Okay, so I will try to do as many practices as I can in given the time frame, and I will send this PowerPoint, copy of this PowerPoint to Tanaj, and she can distribute it to you. And Philip is recording, so he can send you the recording. But let's see how many we can finish. And stop me if you feel I'm going very fast or you need to have a question. Okay, so second is progressive elaboration. So let's talk about progressive elaboration. What is progressive elaboration? So progressive elaboration means refining details as the project progresses. So you don't want to work out on details of all the things, entire project in the beginning. Okay, you work at a high level and then you refine as you go, and it helps enable early and continuous delivery, and that's what happens in Agile world. So you elaborate as you go. So you first develop a product level plan, and then you come to the release. Say, okay, this product will have 4 releases, and then each release, take the first release and say on this first release we'll have 5 sprints, and then you go and focus on the first sprint. So detail out the features, the stories, or whatever you have for the first sprint, then go to the second sprint. So you refine details as the project progresses. That's what progressive elaboration is. And by doing this, you save time and overhead of planning upfront that may change in future. So you save that. But this may or may not work for all the projects. So how do you adapt this to Waterfall? So we know in Waterfall, the entire functionality is delivered big bang or phases. It hampers ability to progressive elaborate in Agile way, like doing releases and sprints. But you can still do something called as a rolling wave planning. I don't know how many of you heard of about rolling wave planning. So what happens in rolling wave planning, that if your project is divided into phases, let's say it's a year-long project and you have divided into 3 phases. So you create a higher level plan for the entire project and then create a detailed plan for first phase. And towards the end of the first phase, you start creating the plan for the next phase. And then towards the end of that phase, you start creating the plan for the next phase. So it seems like a different waves. So each of the phase is seen as a different wave. So that is one way. The rolling wave planning is one way to implement progressive elaboration in waterfall projects. And for that, to implement that, you may have to talk to your customer, you have to talk to your stakeholder. But I will tell you, when you start talking about that, it will make sense. I have done probably hundreds of waterfall projects, ranging from 6 months to 2 years or 3 years. And I have done this for any project that was longer than 6 months. Any project that were longer than 6 months, and I was able to convince the customer that there is no point spending so much time in doing the detailed plan. So I'll give you a high-level plan so you know the major milestones, and then let's focus on the first phase. Uh, let's focus our energies on the first phase and complete the first phase. So if the first phase is like 4 months long, each phase is 4 months long, then maybe towards a month before the first phase ends, start planning the second phase. That way, you can actually utilize your resources also very well. If you don't do that and if you just have phases, then what happens is that in between phases, your resources may be sitting idle. But if you start doing the planning, of the next phase before the previous phase end, your resources may not be sitting idle for any period of time. So you just, as the previous phase declines, you pick up the other phase. So that's called as a rolling wave planning, and that's one way of implementing progressive elaboration in waterfall projects. Okay, so I'm assuming you will stop me. So I'm just moving forward. Okay. So smaller iterations. So let's talk about that practice of agile teams. So what is smaller iterations? So limiting iterations to no more than 2 to 4 weeks. So I should have said actually some teams do 1 week also. Some teams do 1 week of a sprint, and sprint and iteration are interchangeably used. Iteration is more generic word. Sprint is the same thing as iteration applied to Scrum. So when we talk about the Scrum, they call it sprints. So, but it's a iterative process. We know about that. If we deliver in smaller iterations, the biggest benefit is that you get constant feedback from customer. So you deliver at the end of the sprint, show it to the customer, you get customer feedback, you can make the course correction in the next sprint or the sprints later, and that works out really very, very well, because then your customer is fully aligned with you all the times, and the engagement is very, very high. And that also allows you for the teams to do retrospectives. So I was talking about Agile being iterative, customer focused, and data driven. So you look at the matrix from the previous sprint, the velocity and the kind of, your rework, your defects, how many stories you completed, and all kind of, there could be many kind of matrix. So you look at those and see, okay, our planned velocity was 40 story points, and then how many story points we did. Many of the teams that implement Scrum, they have this challenge that whatever plan they put together for a sprint, they many times they are not able to complete everything. So the work gets spilled over from sprint to sprint to sprint to sprint. It just keeps going. So there are reasons why that happens, and there are ways how to manage it and how to finish that as promised. But retrospective is a good way to look at it. We planned 40 story points, we delivered only 30. Why? So it provides more opportunities for improvements, more opportunities for reflection. And that's a very good thing if you have smaller iterations. So less than 2 weeks is a very small, very quick. Sometimes it may be very non-practical for many teams to implement that. And I'll say more than 4 weeks is a too long period for Agile. Some of the teams that start Agile journey, they may say, we want to have like 8 weeks sprints. But then if you have more than 4 weeks, you run a risk of doing waterfall within a sprint. And we need to stay away from that practice if you're implementing Scrum. And Scrum advocates very different way of delivering software. And yeah, as I was talking about, 4 weeks is way too slow. So how do you implement small iterations in Waterfall world. If you're not doing Scrum, how do you implement smaller iterations? So find more ways to have frequent customer touch point. Tanuj was talking about meeting customer more and more, involving customer more and more. So find ways to do frequent customer touch points. It could be review of your deliverables. Whatever your deliverables are, maybe set some frequency to review those deliverables with customers, like at least a month, if not more. 2 weeks will be good, but if 2 weeks is a lot, and people say, no, you don't have time to meet every 2 weeks or so, then every month, whatever deliverables got completed in that month could be reviewed. So set up some kind of a cadence, which is similar to the iteration. You may not be delivering software, you may not be completing software, but whatever is going on, whatever deliverables are produced in that time frame, that those deliverables could be reviewed. Could be a possibility that no deliverable was completed in that period, and that's okay. If sometime that happens, you may either decide not to have that review, or you may decide to have a midterm review of the deliverable. That is also possible. You can have some demonstration of what you did. If it is not a software, it is a document that you prepared. Maybe that document can be reviewed in a meeting. You know, that's much better than emailing the document and somebody looking at that document. It is much better and much more effective if you had all the right people in the room and pulled up the document on a screen and went through that. That's much more effective than, you know, emailing and somebody looking at it. They may not have even time to look at it. So those are some of the ways to involve doing the frequent reviews. Now, daily stand-ups. So this is another very common practice, and I have seen that many teams just adopt this even if they are not implementing all agile practices. They use daily stand-ups. So let's talk about what is a daily stand-up. It is a 15-minute daily meeting of the team. Note down very carefully, 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes daily. Okay, and everybody present, in a round robin manner, they go through, and everybody answers these 3 questions. What did I achieve? Actually, the original is what did I do? I have changed it. I've changed it from doing to achieving. That makes the person a little bit more accountable. So what did I achieve since yesterday? What I plan to achieve today? And what help do I need to achieve my goal of the day? So this basically, the first 2 questions create transparency. So transparency is another big thing in Agile. Transparency, inspection, and adaptation are the 3 pillars of Scrum. So these 2 questions bring transparency, and how they bring transparency is that now at the end of 15 minutes, everybody knows what everybody else is doing, right? So you don't have to, what other way will be faster than this way to know what's going on? There could be, a dashboard somewhere, there could be some report that may come once in a week, and there could be a SharePoint where you may have things stored, but this is the most effective, efficient way to know what's going on in the project. Nothing can be more efficient than this. So these 2 questions build transparency, what's going on. And then this 3rd question actually helps identifying showstoppers. So I am saying that I need help to meet my goals. I am struggling here. I have some showstoppers. I have something that is not in my control. I need John for this help. I'm using this technology for the very first time. I don't know how to make progress. So to achieve my goal for the day, I need this. So this is the way to identify showstoppers or bottlenecks. And this is another very powerful way to identify showstoppers on a daily basis. So you don't have to come to a weekly meeting or to talk about your showstopper. Sometimes somebody misses that meeting, then it's gone for 2 weeks, right? And if somebody else misses that meeting, then the communication just, you know about communication channels. If there are 4 people, then 4 into 3 divided by 2, that's what is the number of communication channel if you're PMPs. So sometimes somebody misses, then you create communication gaps, and that creates problems. So this is a very, very effective way to have transparency and identify showstoppers very quickly on a daily basis, and then act on those showstoppers so the team moves faster. So transparency, showstoppers, and efficiency, that is what a daily stand-up gives you. Very, very important practice, very, very useful practice that all the Agile teams do. And every team member should come prepared to contribute. And how you can finish in 15 minutes, that's a struggle for many teams. They are not able to finish. This 15 minute becomes a half an hour meeting, maybe an hour-long meeting, who knows. So I was working with a team. There were about 20 people in the team, and so when I started coaching, I asked the Scrum Master about daily stand-ups, and she said, "Yeah, we have daily stand-up at 9 o'clock in the morning." I said, "Oh, where is this? I want to come and join." So she said, "We don't have it today." "Oh, well, you don't daily meeting don't have today. It means it is not daily." No, actually, this became like an hour-long meeting, so we decided we do every alternate days. So we have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. "Oh, it is hour-long. Okay, then it will not be sitting, stand up. Everybody cannot stand for an hour. So it is neither daily nor stand-up. So why you call it daily stand-up?" That was something weird. But that's what happens. That it's a skill of the facilitator who is running this meeting to keep it to 15 minutes. And one of the things is everybody come prepared. And these 3 questions, how much time you need to answer these questions? One person, a team member, how much time does it need to answer these questions? Can anybody say how much? I'll say 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, I can answer this question, even less than 30 seconds. I can answer all 3 of these questions. I go to the meeting, this is what I achieved yesterday, this is what I'm going to today, I'm fine, I don't have any problems. Or I have this problem, that's all. Less than 30 seconds. So even if you have a team of 20 people, you can finish this meeting in 15 minutes or less. So this is something that all the Agile teams do. How do we adapt this to Waterfall? Is find ways to have team meet frequently. So you can do actually daily stand-up for your team. No issues in that. You can have exactly same way, even if you're not working in sprints, even if you're not working in Agile, just have daily stand-up. And you can keep in the same place, same time. This can be implemented without any alterations in any kind of project, in any kind of team, in any kind of setup. Now, the next practice is retrospectives. So what is a retrospective? It's basically reflecting back on the previous sprint or previous iteration. What went well, what did not go well, or what could be improved, and what action should be taken to improve. So normally I do it with the sticky notes. So the green sticky note and pink sticky note and blue sticky notes. So everybody is, and it's very quick. I'll tell you, it's very, very quick. So the team gets together, give everybody 5 minutes to write one sticky for what means just one sticky for one thing that went well. If they think there are 4 things went well, 4 stickies. Okay. Similarly, what could be improved? So they in 5 minutes, they are given 5 minutes to write their stickies, and 5 minutes is more than enough. And then go stick it on the wall. and then the entire team comes around and gathers around the space there and go over that, what went well or could be better, and somebody would have put some action items also. Look at that, discuss with the team, 15 minutes, and then say what are the action items. I will say every team that I coach, I say you just pick one action item. You don't have to pick 20. Just pick one action item that you will implement in your next sprint. Tomorrow, pick that item. And every sprint you pick that item. So guess what? In 10 sprints, you have made 20 improvements. So, let's say 6 months, you have 26 weeks, you have 13 sprints. So 13 improvements, that's a whole lot. There's a lots of improvement that a team can go through just doing one in every sprint. Just doing one in every sprint. So that's the power of this retrospective that every team does at the end of their iteration or sprint. And there are a lot many benefits of doing retrospectives. The efficiency improves, the ability improves, and the honesty and openness improves. So there are a lot many advantages of doing retrospectives in agile teams. So how do you do that in waterfall environments? So you hold lessons learned normally at the end of the project. That's something during your project closure or phase closure. That's the time you do lessons learned. So if you're doing a lessons learned at the end of the project, what is the benefit of that? If you are working in a matrix environment where you pull people from different functional areas, at 10% of this person's time, 20% of this person's time, 50% of this person's time, like that. That's how you work in matrix environment, and here is the project team. Now the project is over, you're doing lessons learned, then the team gets dispersed. You have other team for the new project, so whatever environment was there, whatever team dynamics or team collaboration happened, those are gone. So there is practically no use of doing that lessons learned. And some teams, try to say, okay, we will document it. We have a lessons learned database, and then when a new team starts, they can look at that lessons learned database. Great ideas, but I think it's very hard to implement. I have not seen many teams very effectively using the lessons learned which was stored in a database. Very, very difficult because you have to design your database in a manner that is searchable very easily, and there are other challenges that come up. So why we cannot do retrospectives in our projects more frequently? What stops us? Why we cannot do it for a year-long project? Why we cannot do it every month? And same 3 questions, same use of sticky notes. Every month spend maybe 30-40 minutes. It doesn't need more than 5 minutes for writing the stickies, 15 minutes going on the wall and looking at it, maybe another 10 minutes deciding about the action item. That's all. 30 minutes, you are done, right? You're done in 30 minutes. The skill is of the facilitator or the project manager. In case of Scrum, it is Scrum Master who is facilitating this event or activity. In 30 minutes, you can do a very effective retrospectives. So 30 minutes of time in a month, if you spend in your project, even if it is not a agile project, you can make significant improvement on your project. The biggest thing that you will achieve is the team collaboration improves. The team dynamics, team chemistry improves, enormously. You come together and you see the power of that that retrospective. Sometimes you may say, oh, my teams are spread all over, and I cannot do this. I don't have the luxury of bringing the team together in a room and doing this sticky note thing. Well, there are tools to do that. If you heard about Mural, I do that. I'm an enterprise agile coach for IBM, and I'm coaching for a division that has 100,000 people all across the globe. And I'm getting ready to do retrospective tomorrow for about 10 people who are in different locations. So Mural is the tool. So you create a mural, and it basically simulates the sticky note kind of a thing in over the web. You can really move the stickies. One person can move, other person can see what is going on. You can move, have a new sticky coming up. Beautiful tool. So you can do that even if your teams are remote. It's so powerful. So I'll say it's 12:54, 55, close to that. So I'll stop here and take questions. I knew I cannot cover all 10 practices in an hour's time. It's very difficult. Though I have just 1 or 2 slides on each practice. So I will jump to the I will skip some of the slides. In the meantime, if you have any question, let's talk about that. So let's see where there is. Yeah, let's come to this.
And Sanaj, do you have any examples of practices for teams that are globally spread out in, say, 3 different time zones? Are there any best practices for those kinds of distributed teams?
Yeah, so I was just giving an example tonight that I'm working with IBM that are spread all over the world. They're probably, I work with teams that are more than 5 different time zones. So there are tools that are used, but the practices are same. You do daily stand-ups. You use your, WebEx or GoToMeeting or whatever tool the company uses. IBM has their own tools, and every company has a tool like that. So you can use a GoToMeeting like that, and everybody comes and you talk about those 3 things and finish that daily stand-up. Retrospectives, I just talked about using Mural. And if you don't have that tool, you may not be able to do stickies, but you can go around the room and say what's going well and what could be better. I do retrospectives with different teams. At least I'm doing retrospective with 4 or 5 teams every week. And they are, many of them are sitting in Europe and India and different parts of the US. And it's perfectly fine. So I think all these practices that I was talking about can be used in a remote environment. Whether it will be same level of effectiveness as people being in the same room, no. Let me tell you, it will not be same effectiveness will be less as compared to if everybody is together face to face. Face to face is the best way of doing conversation. So that is not best, but can it be done remotely? Yeah, it can be done remotely. All of these practices can be done remotely. So let's talk about quickly in a couple of minutes. Are there any agile practices that you think you'll not be able to implement in your project? So let's think about that. And I'll flip through a couple of slides here in the meantime. So let's talk about that. Is there any agile practice that you think you will not be able to implement in your environment? Whatever is your environment. Any agile practice that I listed. Progressive requirement refining. Okay. Okay, and Tanaj, you can, if you want to get some ideas on that, I can talk to you later how to make that happen. It will need, yeah, that is one practice which will need your customers and stakeholders to be on board. Yeah, yeah, that is one practice that will need that, definitely. Anybody else? Is there any other practice that that you feel cannot be implemented easily? Any other practice? Progressive elaboration for sure. Yeah. Continuous change management. Okay. I have to ask why. I think continuous change management can be done. Continuous change management or continuous improvement without a CR, without a CR. Okay, okay, without a CR process. I think that that will be something that you need to involve your stakeholders and management in if you have a formal change management process. But I think if you say continuous improvement, that can be implemented using retrospectives, because we are talking about how the team is going to work differently. What is one single thing or that team can change to improve the way they are working. So that can be done without change request process, because we're not asking for a scope change. We're asking for how the team works, and really that is nothing to do with the if you are delivering a project to outside world in a contract, or if you're in-house team, then you have a you might have some expectations set with your internal customer. So that may be a little difficult. For change request, that may be difficult, but for retrospectives and implementing some of the improvements, that may not be a problem. And I will be doing this as a keynote address in one of the PMI chapters conference coming up, PMI Northeast Ohio chapter. And there it's a little different. It's basically there is a strategic perspective of this. So bringing in agility, how strategically it can be done, and these are some of the practices can be done without actually what I say, changing things upside down. Okay, I'm here for another minute or so. If you have any questions, let me know. Or if you have any comment, I hope this was useful to you.